Chapter 10, Part 2 of Moonfleet. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rob Powell. Moonfleet by J. Mead Faulkner. Chapter 10, Part 2. The day was still young, and far below us was stretched the moving floor of the channel, with the silver-gray film of night mists not yet lifted in the offing. A hummocky up-and-down line of cliffs, all projections, dents, bays and hollows, trended southward till it ended in the great bluff of St. Albans Head, 10 miles away. The cliff face was gleaming white, the sea tawny inshore, but purest blue outside, with the straight sun path across it, spangled and gleaming like a mackerel's back. The relief of being once more on firm ground, and the exultation of an escape from immediate danger, removed my pain and made me forget that my leg was broken. So I lay for a moment basking in the sun, and the wind, which a few minutes before threatened to blow me from that narrow ledge, seemed now but the gentlest of breezes, fresh with the breath of the kindly sea. But this was only for a moment, for the anguish came back and grew apace, and I fell to thinking dismally of the plight we were in. How things had been against us in these last days. First, there was losing the Why Not, and that was bad enough. Second, there was the being known by the excise for smugglers, and perhaps for murderers. Third, and last, there was the breaking of my leg, which made escape so difficult. But most of all, there came before my eyes that grey face turned up against the morning sun, and I thought of all it meant for Grace, and would have given my own life to call back that of our worst enemy. Then Elzevir sat up, stretching himself like one waking out of a sleep, and said, "We must be gone. They will not be back for some time yet, and when they come, will not think to search closely for us hereabouts. But that we cannot risk, and must get clear away. This leg of thine will keep us tied for weeks, and we must find some place where we can lie hid, and tend it. Now, I know such a hiding hole in Purbeck, which they call Joseph's Pit, and thither we must go, but it will take all the day to get there, for it is 7 miles off, and I am older than I was, and thou too heavy a babe to carry over lightly." I did not know the pit he spoke of, but was glad to hear of some place, however far off, where I could lie still and get ease from the pain, and so he took me in his arms again, and started off across the fields. I need not tell of that weary journey, and indeed could not if I wished, for the pain went to my head and filled me with such a drowsy anguish that I knew nothing except when some unlooked-for movement gave me a sharper twinge and made me cry out. At first Elzevir walked briskly, but as the day wore on went slower, and was fain more than once to put me down and rest, till at last he could only carry me 100 yards at a time. It was afternoon, for the sun was past the meridian, and very hot for the time of year, when the face of the country began to change, and instead of the short sward of the open down, sprinkled with tiny white snail shells, the ground was brashy with flat stones, and divided up into tillage fields. It was a bleak, wide-bidden place enough, looking as if 'twould never pay for turning, and instead of hedges there were dreary walls built of dry stone without mortar. Behind one of these walls, broken down in places, but held together with straggling ivy, and buttressed here and there with a bramble bush, Elzevir put me down at length, and said, "I am beat, and can carry thee no farther for this present, though there is not now much farther to go. We have passed Purbeck gates, and these walls will screen us from prying eyes, if any chance comer pass along the down. And as for the soldiers, they are not like to come this way so soon, and if they come, I cannot help it, for weariness and the sun's heat have made my feet like lead. A score of years ago I would have laughed at such a task, but now 'tis different, and I must take a little sleep and rest till the air is cooler. So sit thee here, and lean thy shoulder up against the wall, and thus thou canst look through this broken place, and watch both ways. Then, if thou see aught moving, wake me up." I wish I had a thimbleful of powder to make this whistle sound, and he took Maskew's silver-butted pistol again from his bosom, and handled it lovingly. 'Tis like my evil luck to carry firearms 30 years, and leave them at home at a pinch like this." With that, he flung himself down where there was a narrow shadow close against the bottom of the wall, and in a minute I knew from his heavy breathing that he was asleep. The wind had freshened much and was blowing strong from the west. And now that I was under the lee of the wall, I began to perceive that drowsiness creeping upon me which overtakes a man who has been tousled for an hour or two by the wind, and gets at length into the shelter. Moreover, though I was not tired by grievous toil like Elzevir, I had passed a night without sleep, and felt besides the weariness of pain to lull me to slumber. So it was that before a quarter of an hour was past, I had much to do to keep awake, for all I knew that I was left on guard. Then I sought something to fix my thoughts, and looking on that side of the wall where the sward was, fell to counting the molehills that were cast up in numbers thereabout. And when I had exhausted them, and reckoned up 30 little heaps of dry and powdery brown earth that lay at random on the green turf, I turned my eyes to the tillage field on the other side of the wall, and saw the inch-high blades of corn coming up between the stones. Then I fell to counting the blades, feeling glad to have discovered a reckoning that would not be exhausted at 30, but would go on for millions and millions and millions, and before I had reached 10 in so heroic a numeration, was fast asleep. A sharp noise woke me with a start that set the pain tingling in my leg, and though I could see nothing, I knew that a shot had been fired very near us. I was for waking Elzevir, but he was already full awake, and put a finger on his lip to show I should not speak. Then he crept a few paces down the wall to where an ivy bush overtopped it, enough for him to look through the leaves without being seen. He dropped down again with a look of relief, and said, "'Tis but a lad scaring rooks with a blunderbuss. We will not stir unless he makes this way." A minute later he said, "The boy is coming straight for the wall. We shall have to show ourselves." And while he spoke, there was a rattle of falling stones, where the boy was partly climbing and partly pulling down the dry wall, and so Elzevir stood up. The boy looked frightened, and made as if he would run off. But Elzevir passed him the time of day in a civil voice, and he stopped and gave it back. "What are you doing here, son?" Block asked. "Scaring rooks for Farmer Top," was the answer. "Have you got a charge of powder to spare?" said Elzevir, showing his pistol. "I want to get a rabbit in the gorse for supper, and have dropped my flask. Maybe you've seen a flask in walking through the furrows." He whispered to me to lie still, so that it might not be perceived my leg was broken, and the boy replied, "No, I have seen no flask, but very like have not come the same way as you, being sent out here from Lower Moyne. And as for powder, I have little left, and must save that for the rooks, or shall get a beating for my pains." "Come," said Elzevir, "give me a charge or two, and there is 1/2 crown for thee." And he took the coin out of his pocket and showed it. The boy's eyes twinkled, and so would mine at so valuable a piece, and he took out from his pocket a battered cowskin flask. "Give flask and all," said Elzevir, "and thou shalt have a crown," and he showed him the larger coin. No time was wasted in words. Elzevir had the flask in his pocket, and the boy was biting the crown. "What shot have you?" said Elzevir. "What? Have you dropped your shot flask too?" asked the boy, and his voice had something of surprise in it. "Nay, but my shot are over small. If thou hast a slug or two, I would take them." "I have a dozen goose slugs, number 2, said the boy, "but thou must pay a shilling for them. My master says I never am to use them, except I see a swan or a buzzard, or something fit to cook come over. I shall get a sound beating for my pains, and to be beat is worth a shilling." "If thou art beat, be beat for something more," said Elzevir the tempter. "Give me that firelock that thou carriest, and take a guinea." "Nay, I know not," said the boy. "There are queer tales afloat at Lower Moyne, how that a posse met the contraband this morning, and shots were fired, and a gauger got an overdose of lead, maybe of goose slugs number 2. The smugglers got off clear, but they say the hue and cry is up already, and that a head price will be fixed of £20. So if I sell you a fowling piece, maybe I shall do wrong, and have the government upon me as well as my master." The surprise in his voice was changed to suspicion, for while he spoke, I saw that his eye had fallen on my foot, though I tried to keep it in the shadow, and that he saw the boot clotted with blood, and the kerchief tied around my leg. "'Tis for that very reason," says Elzevir, "that I want the firelock. These smugglers